Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down some of the most recent NFL news, including things like the Matt Ryan trade from the Atlanta Falcons to the Indianapolis Colts, as well as the Deshaun Watson trade from the Houston Texans to the Cleveland Browns. But before we can get into the in-depth look into these trades, I would like to ask that if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you leave a like on today's video. It would help us out a ton. And if you would like to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into my NFL news breakdown. So we're to begin with the Matt Ryan trade. So yesterday, Matt Ryan was traded from the Atlanta Falcons to the Indianapolis Colts in exchange for a third-round pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. Now, it seemed like things in Atlanta were going bad in terms of Matt Ryan because there was so much talk about it basically being a done deal for Deshaun Watson to become the starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. It seemed as though the Falcons were ready to throw all the picks at the wall. They were potentially ready to trade guys like Kyle Pitts away to go ahead and get Deshaun Watson. But then out of nowhere, like an RKO from Randy Orton, Deshaun Watson goes to Cleveland, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later in the video. And then Matt Ryan's kind of in a situation where it's like, what the fuck, man? Like, I thought I was the guy. A lot of people consider me, if I'm Matt Ryan, to be the best Atlanta Falcon ever. And you're going to go ahead and trade me away? You're going to go ahead and get rid of me for Deshaun Watson? That's kind of messed up. And then I'm hearing some stuff about, oh, maybe he's going to stay there. Maybe he's like, oh, you know what? It is what it is. I understand why they want Deshaun Watson and they don't want me anymore. It's whatever. I'll stay there. Give me a new deal. And then out of nowhere, this was also one of those things that no one really saw coming. The Indianapolis Colts just went ahead and traded for Matt Ryan. So the Indianapolis Colts last year were a humongous disappointment. They should have easily made the playoffs last season, but instead, we end up seeing them choke to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the final game of the season, and Carson Wentz was far from ideal. Now, was he some terrible quarterback that you couldn't really see ever doing anything as an Indianapolis Colt? No, because he's just good enough to where if the team really elevated themselves, if the defense was on point, if the offense, like Jonathan Taylor, was running for 100 plus yards in that game, then maybe they could have won. Maybe they could have had a spark in the playoffs, and maybe Carson Wentz could have been the quarterback there for the next couple of years. But I feel as though the team just saw enough of that bullshit. They got rid of him. He went to the Washington football team, the Washington Commanders, and then they were like, you know what? While a lot of people don't have the kindest of words to say for Matt Ryan recently, a couple of years ago, Matt Ryan, to many people, was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and rightfully so, as he won the MVP just a couple of years ago. But more recently, it seems like the narrative on Matt Ryan has kind of switched, but not for the right reasons, because the Atlanta Falcons offense last year was pretty dog shit. They didn't have a great offensive line. Calvin Ridley was gone for a majority of the season. They let go of Julio Jones. This was a very watered-down Atlanta Falcons offense. I mean, their best player by far and away was Cordero Patterson, who was playing running back and wide receiver at the exact same time. So the offense was kind of a disaster, and it seems like a lot of people were blaming Matt Ryan, when in reality, while Matt Ryan wasn't playing at his best, at his peak, he wasn't terrible. So I love this trade for fantasy football for the Indianapolis Colts. My confidence in the Colts players was starting to dwindle because I wasn't really sure who their quarterback was going to be. With Carson Wentz, I was fine with it because, you know what, Carson Wentz isn't going to be a guy that elevates the players, but he's also not going to put them down by being just that shitty of a quarterback. But here with Matt Ryan, I really think he is going to get back to form as looking like one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Not necessarily a top 5 guy or even a top 10 guy, but maybe a top 12 quarterback in the NFL. And I think he could easily be that in fantasy football in 2022. Now, the biggest thing when it comes to trying to decipher who is going to be a top 12 quarterback in fantasy football has to be the rushing upside. And the biggest issue with ranking Matt Ryan inside the top 12 is while he's not just a statue, he's a little bit mobile. He could go ahead and run outside the pocket, maybe get a couple of yards a couple of times a year. At the end of the day, he's not Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. He's not one of these quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, who can run the ball. So that definitely hurts his upside. But at the end of the day here, I love this position for him in Indianapolis, and I think he could have an excellent season. In terms of the other players on the team, this has no impact no negative impact, I should say, on Jonathan Taylor. If anything, this is positive because I believe that the offense is going to run a lot more swimmingly with Matt Ryan under center. This would help out Michael Pittman as well as the potential wide receiver that they could end up drafting in the 2022 NFL draft. So overall, this is awesome for the Indianapolis Colts, but a big downgrade in terms of the Atlanta Falcons, because now the Atlanta Falcons, they don't have a quarterback. So who are they going to go ahead and get? And they end up signing Marcus Mariota on a 2-year, $18.75 million deal. Now, I'm not necessarily a Marcus Mariota hater, but I also don't feel as though Marcus Mariota is as good as Matt Ryan. I just don't think that. I think there's a reason why the Titans were tired of him and brought in Ryan Tannehill. I think there's a reason why he wasn't able to surpass Derek Carr, who is not some elite quarterback. So that does worry me for the Atlanta Falcons. And this offense basically looks like a complete and utter stay away right now in terms of fantasy football, unless, of course, they draft a Malik Willis. They draft a different quarterback who you may be interested in for fantasy football. Now, again, I'm not trying to sound like a Marcus Mariota hater. I just don't really like how this offense is trending right now in Atlanta, and I don't think Marcus Mariota is going to be that savior. While he does have that rushing upside for fantasy football, I just don't really see him putting up huge numbers. But before we can get on into the other news to discuss in today's video, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsors over at UnderDog. Our sponsor, UnderDog Fantasy, is known for their NFL best ball tournaments. However, UnderDog doesn't stop there. UnderDog has plenty of other contests for you to compete in, including live draft contests and pick'ems, in which you can make up to 20 times your entry fee. Use promo code Awesemo. I'm pointing at it right here. Again, promo code Awesemo to get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100 and get started on UnderDog Fantasy today. If you guys play NBA, you play any other sports, you can hop on there. And if you like just fantasy football, you can play on there as well. I understand some people don't necessarily love drafting in March, April. They like drafting closer to June, July, or August when a lot of people do their fantasy drafts, but I like doing best ball drafts now, so go ahead and hop on there if you would like. Again, promo code Awesemo to get a first match deposit bonus up to $100. So the next news blurb to discuss here is Leonard Fournette signing a 3-year, $21 million contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. My assumption is that Ronald Jones ends up walking. They end up getting rid of Ronald Jones, and this puts Leonard Fournette in a chef's kiss, perfect scenario to succeed, at least in this year. Now, if you're looking at this for dynasty purposes, say 2023, next season, I'm not too sure how much I want to deal with Leonard Fournette because Tom Brady is going to most likely be gone by then. But right now, with Tom Brady, with this team that they have in Tampa Bay, Leonard Fournette could easily be a top 12 running back in 2022. Would I rank him there? No, I wouldn't rank him there. I'd rank him closer to like running back 18, 17, something like that, but I am definitely very interested in Leonard Fournette, especially if Ronald Jones does end up walking. Now, if they bring back Ronald Jones, I'll still be fine drafting Leonard Fournette, but there is still that Bruce Arians effect where maybe he just gives Ronald Jones too many carries and it pisses you off. That happened a lot in 2020, not so much in 2021, but you never know what Bruce Arians is thinking. But again, if they do get rid of Ronald Jones, then man, oh man, am I going to be very high on Leonard Fournette in 2022. The final news blurb to discuss, probably the biggest news blurb of them all that I've discussed in today's video, is Deshaun Watson has been officially traded to the Cleveland Browns from the Houston Texans. The actual trade details here are that the Browns received, I apologize for that. The Browns traded away to the Texans. The Texans receive a first and second round pick in 2022, a 2023 and 2024 first round pick, a third round pick in 2023, a fourth rounder in 2024, and an additional 2024 sixth round pick. Now, in terms of fantasy football, who gives a fuck about the trade details in reality? But this is quite the haul for Deshaun Watson. Now, in terms of Deshaun Watson's fantasy value in 2022, you just have to assume that Roger Goodell is going to smack the gavel down and give this guy at least a 6-game suspension. My best guess on this is maybe an 8-9 game suspension for Deshaun Watson. Now, we could get into a situation where Deshaun Watson tries to repeal, and then maybe they go from, say, 6 or 8 games to 3 games. But if I'm being honest with you, based upon everything that has happened, the NFL definitely has to suspend him, and I think it's going to be at least 6+ games in 2022, and that puts Deshaun Watson in a very weird zone for fantasy football, because when you draft him, you recognize that, hey, I might not have this guy for over half of the season, but at the same time, when he does come back, I think Deshaun Watson will be a top 5 quarterback from coming back going forward. Now, I understand, but Nick, he missed all of last year. He's not going to be the same guy. Maybe there's rust. People said the same thing, me included, about Jamar Chase. Now, I understand that he's a quarterback, but he's going to be just fine. I promise you. When he comes back, he is going to be a top 5 quarterback in fantasy football, but that does change where you draft him. And I think once they give him this suspension, once they slap him with the suspension, then we can have a real discourse about this. But until then, it's pretty hard to guess where you would want to be drafting, because again, I think this is going to be a hefty suspension for Deshaun Watson. So let me know down below in the comment section what you guys thought about all of these NFL news blurbs here, again with Matt Ryan getting traded to the Colts, the Falcons ending up picking up Marcus Mariota, Leonard Fournette signing a $21 million contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Deshaun Watson becoming a Cleveland Brown. There's also still the lurking talks about where Baker Mayfield is going to end up going. Now, it seems like a lot of teams are out on him, so hopefully the Seahawks are kind of his last hope here, his last hurrah. Maybe he ends up as a Seattle Seahawk, but that is still very up in the air at this point. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure that you hit that like button as well as that subscribe button down below. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. I love each and every single one of you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, guys, goodbye.